Welcome back, everybody, and welcome if you're a first-time watcher. This ESG presentation about leadership, entrepreneur support group. We support entrepreneurs. The topic that we've been covering as of late are leadership topics. Thank you, A. Pizzle. 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. We last left off on law number 16. That was the last one we finished, which was momentum. So we talked about getting our team to buy in, the law of victory, the law of momentum.
Sorry, there's
Now
a
we're
cat
on,
fight behind me.
it adds character to the convo.
Okay.
Um, the next law that we're going to discuss is the law of priorities. The law of priorities, law number 17. And he talks about one of the key quotes that I pulled out was activity is not necessarily accomplishment. Um,
Amen.
And yeah, and just being transparent, like when I first started my entrepreneur journey back in, 2016, 2017, I was doing a bunch of stuff. I this to-do list, writing a bunch of stuff down, like change my bio, like post on Instagram, like do all these things. And then it's like, I ain't make no sales today. Like, what is going on? I'm doing stuff, but again, activity is not necessarily accomplishment. Um, so he goes through three things that how should I phrase this? I guess a checklist system, if you will, of things that he has to check off in order to determine if this task is a priority or not. It's three R's: what's required, what's the return, and what's the reward. So like, what is required of me? Okay, like what is required? Is it that I have to do, if I work at an auto body shop and I'm the manager, like, is it required that I'm actually fixing cars? Not necessarily. I have a team for that. Like, what is required for like managing budgets, so on and so forth? What's the return? Okay, so if I do go out and I work in an auto body shop and I'm working on cars, like, what's the return? Like, is there a return on that? I can't say because now I'm creating more work for myself, blah, blah, blah. What's the reward for it? So just a checklist, that's how I phrase it in my head, a checklist of things. What's required of me, what's the return, and then what's the reward? Because if you're not, I'm gonna say if you're not, I think, and he gives some examples in the book of how he uses that system. But like when I think of just my day-to-day things, like again, activity is not necessarily accomplishment. You might be doing something, but it's not necessarily required for you to do. You might be doing something, but it's not necessarily going to lend you the greatest return on your investment in time, which then also might not get you the reward you're seeking. So back to my example of just doing a whole bunch of random stuff and posting on social media. Is it required of me? Potentially, right? I got to market myself, right? What's the return? Okay, maybe get some followers, maybe get some likes. What's the reward? The instant gratification of feeling like I did something. Is the reward worth all that? I can't say. I can't say.
I
Any
would
thought?
think as a business owner, that's easier than actually as a person. Because
Really?
as a business
Oh,
owner, the reward should be, even if it's not immediately financial, something that leads to a financial reward. Because you can't stay in business without money.
yeah.
And so if you're doing things that, and I mean, sometimes it takes, as entrepreneurs, we have to go through that, like what works and what doesn't, because different businesses, different things work in terms of strategy and marketing and stuff like that. So we have to figure out as we're growing our businesses what works with ours. And sometimes that unfortunately does lead to activity that goes nowhere. But it's, if what you're doing isn't leading to that sale at some point, then obviously it's pointless. But even if it doesn't pay out right away, if it leads to something else that leads to something else that leads to that sale, then you're getting to that ultimate reward. Because again, we have to make a profit to stay in business. Whether our goal is to go into it to get rich, it doesn't matter. The business has to make, or the business doesn't continue.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as a person, that's a whole different thing that we won't even address today.
Well, I think,
Then rewards
but
are different.
Well, I was going to say, I think it's important to address too, because I mean, we're all humans, and outside of business, we have our personal lives and our personal dwellings, and I think that's often a challenge. Like when you add in, a family, you got kids, you got, if you got PTO, you're on the board of this nonprofit, you're doing this and this. It's hard to determine what is required of you. It's hard to determine what that return is going to be, like sitting and having a conversation with somebody for an hour. It's hard to determine what that return is going to be and what that reward is going to be. Like you have to be thinking really long-term minded, really looking into the future to determine like what that return is going to be. Because right now you're not going to get a return on that 1 hour conversation. But long term, what the reward is going to be, increased trust. Now you're actually investing in somebody else's livelihood, which is I didn't say who the person you're having a conversation with, but I'm sure that relationship, you made an investment in that relationship in that regard. So, but I think it's hard, right? Because obviously you have your personal biases. You might have a friend who requires a lot of time and attention, and you might feel good doing that, but it might not be the greatest return on your investment. But again, like you said, it's like you kind of got to try it out and then decide. Like you have to take some time to examine the things that you're doing and take an audit of the things that you're doing and how you're spending your time and how you're investing your time and see if it's required giving you that return and giving you the reward that you're seeking. But I agree. I would say the personal side is much harder than
No, it
business.
gets complicated because you're talking multiple different factors and values, and the reward isn't clear. Like if there's not a clear cut, like what is the reward? The reward might be different for different situations and different things that you're doing. The reward on one situation might be time with your family. Whereas on another one, it can vary so much. Like it gets very, very complicated as a human being. But I mean, business, like I said, it's straightforward. No matter what you're doing and no matter what reasons you started the business, like I said, you have to make money. And can you have different rewards while you're doing that? Like, impacting lives, like doing something for the greater good, things like that. Yes. But you can't do those things if you aren't staying in business, and you can't stay in business if you're not making money. Even nonprofits, they have to fundraise to exist. Otherwise, you're just a cute little name on a federal list somewhere as a business, not doing anything.
Yeah, win 8, 5, 2, 3, 4. Facts. So he continues. He talks about the 80/20 principle, where 80% of the results are coming from 20% of the things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. So really locking in on those few things that are going to give you the greatest reward. And he even talks about that with your team, right? Like 80% of the output of your organization is from 20% of the organization. So really figuring out what is that 20%, who is that 20%, and investing in those individuals so that way they can give you the greatest return. Again, what's required, what's the return, what's the reward. You might feel bad initially by leaving certain people out of the equation as far as, decisions, so on and so forth. But, if that's that 20% that you're rocking with, that's going to get you the 80% return, kind of what's required of you to get the return and the reward that's expected. So, um,
Roles are different. I mean, everybody can't be equal in this situation. Like it's
right,
impossible.
yeah, man, especially if that output is not there too. It's like trying to expect what is it, Peyton Pritchard. So for all my Celtics fans, Peyton Pritchard, I like him ever since he was in Oregon, but he doesn't get playing time for the Celtics, so he doesn't get a say in what offenses run and the defense. Like he doesn't get a say because most of the output is coming from two or three of those players.
Yeah.
Just to give a sports example of, and it just is what it is. So until he can prove his value and become a more integral part of the team, then at that point, then it's a different conversation. But
Gotta pay his
independent,
dues.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And then speaking of paying dues, that leads us right into the next law, which is law number 18, the law of sacrifice. Leaders give up to go up. And then oftentimes people talk about sacrifice. They talk about Martin Luther King because of all the funds he raised, like his Nobel Peace Prize. He decided to give all of that to different charities, and I think they said, don't quote me on it, but I think they said he might have made like maybe $18,000 in his career, something like that, or 18,000 a year. And this was back in like the 60s and 70s. But he was basically giving everything that he had to the cause. I mean,
Mhm,
sacrificing, his family safety, his life. Again,
mhm.
it's a very vague example because like how does that translate to business? But as a leader, and he talks about this, like the higher the level of leadership, this is a direct quote, the higher the level of leadership, the higher the sacrifice. Like, and I mean, you're not sacrificing your life like MLK, right? Maybe you are, right? Maybe those late nights and early
Yeah.
mornings catch up to you, but um, there is no success without being able to sacrifice something.
Well, and we can actually like a very present example with us doing the clinic with Aaliyah, like with it being a first thing, we have to sacrifice a lot of time that is not bringing in money right now. A lot of time because we're having to figure out the entire system. It's not just like we've got something plug and play, like, hey, we've been doing this for like a year. We know exactly what to do, how to market, where to go, like how to do all of this stuff, what time is required on our ends, you know, everything else seems to work seamlessly with minor glitches here and there. It's like we're figuring out the whole pieces, which takes a whole lot more of a time commitment from us now to make it so that it doesn't require that time later. And we can also use that on the other end, like with us looking for volunteer coaches. Like a lot of people just want to go in and work with people that have certain experience or work in certain areas and just automatically like get paid or always get paid. And they don't realize that there are a lot of times you're not going to make much or you're going to have to give up your time and maybe do some of these things to not get paid because it's about the experience, it's about the networking, it's about like the bigger values that are attached to it. They're like, that's our present example is one that can kind of show that sacrifice on both ends. Because I
Mhm.
know that from talking to people like looking to see like, hey, would you be interested in coaching with us? Like full disclosure, we can't pay because it's our first clinic. Like we've got to put that money back into it to get it growing. But if you get on the ground with us now and want to travel with us later, we remember that we take care of you. We can put you out there in other ways. We can do XYZ for you. We just can't give you that monetary reward. And it goes both ways. Some of the responses are basically like, hell no. And some of them are like, oh, I'm 100% behind you. I'm into it. I want to do this. And so it's the people that understand that that sacrifice happens at times will go further
Yeah.
because it's
And
not
I'm
always easy.
my bad. Yeah, I was gonna piggyback on that. I'm sure if you ask any successful person, whether it be in sports or business, I'm pretty sure they volunteered or did something for free.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure of it. I'm not. Spoelstra, a great example. He was a video coordinator
Yep.
and ended up becoming a head coach. I'm sure he
Well,
sacrificed, quite a bit.
I guarantee you he did because anybody who came up in the NBA that didn't come from like player to high profile job, anybody who came up through that NBA system, whether it's a player who didn't have this huge name that automatically made them the star of a franchise, so most role players in the league, which is most of the league, or anybody in the organizations who started and worked their way up, oh my gosh, when you start in that business, you're making next to nothing and you're working insane hours for most of the year. You don't get holidays because they play on holidays. If the team's on the road, then hey, you get lucky if you're not one of the ones that has to travel with them and you can spend the holiday with your family. But if you're playing at home, good luck. I mean, think of those players, the sacrifices that they have to make on that end. Like it's a brutal battle to the top of a business like that. And that's it's not unique because there actually are a lot of businesses like that. I mean, think of retail. I mean, good Lord, retail that work close to holidays and have all the big sales. And so, okay, if you're supposed to, for example, work Black Friday in a store, how do you travel for Thanksgiving? Or same thing around Christmas, like you're traveling up to, or you're working up to Christmas because people are buying Christmas gifts, but then you have to be there on the 26th because that's your huge after Christmas. There are sacrifices in a lot of businesses on that end, but I mean, the hours you get in for what you're getting out of it at some point is
Yeah.
ridiculous.
So let's play. I want to play devil's advocate. How do you differentiate between understanding that you have to sacrifice to get somewhere, as opposed to this organization or this leader is taking advantage of you?
You have to know what your goals are, number one, because honestly, and this is from my experience working in basketball, sometimes it's both.
Mm,
Sometimes it's a necessary sacrifice, but it's also the organization taking advantage of the fact that they know you have to go through these steps in order to do
mhm,
this. So you have to know what your goals are, and you have to utilize those opportunities the right way. I know people who have been in the business and worked their way up in teams and or not even kind of plateaued in teams or things like that, but they've kind of been for the most part in one location or like one like subgroup of basketball, and they don't have the network or the resources that I do. And so it's how you use those opportunities. Like you have to do certain things, but kind of goes to the priorities. What is your reward going to be? What are the returns going to be? So if you go into something knowing that you have to do this and you're making no money or not much money, what are you going to take out of it to make sure you don't have to do this for an extended period of time so that it becomes you're truly being taken advantage of? So are you going to go in there? Are you going to meet people who can help you move forward? Are you going to learn everything that you can, not just about the job that you're there to do, but every single other piece of it so that you can make yourself more marketable and versatile to somebody else? But you can't do that if you don't have your direction. If you're just going in there to figure it out, you're going to be lost and you're going to kind of either grind yourself to death or you're going to just lose track altogether and quit and do something else. Because I mean, certain industries can work you to death if you don't have a way out, but you have to know what you're doing and you have to know how to utilize that time there to get yourself to where you can say, I'm done. I got what I
yeah,
needed. I can move on to the next one.
yeah. And I asked that question because that's the apprentice side of it, as in like you're the student. But John Maxwell talks about, this quote, like now let's talk about it from the leadership side. He says, leaders are asked to give up more than others because when you become a leader, you lose the right to think about yourself.
Mhm.
And I say that because, like, yes, because again, you can,
Mhm.
that was the question, from the intern side, but now let's look at it from the leadership side. It's like, I kind of have to
Mhm.
through the ringer and see what, because I need to know if you're gonna stay down and be loyal. I need to know that you're gonna develop this skill set. Obviously, there's different levels to it, right? And then there's
Mhm.
obviously that big gray area that comes from like, I need you to do this to become the person that you need to be. And on the other end of the spectrum
Yeah.
where it's like, I'm just using you. But like as a leader, it's up to you to think about and make those everyday
Mhm.
sacrifices. I'm learning this like right now, like the biggest sacrifice is being selfless. It's not about you.
Mhm.
It's once you become a leader, it's no longer about you. Like who gives a like it's not about
Yeah.
you. It is what it is. Like, there's things that you have to do because you have to do it. Because it's required of you, because it's going
Yeah.
to get you the return, and because it's going to get you the reward. And I think that's the sacrifice as a leader, anybody who's looking to become a leader, that you have to be okay with making. And if you're not okay with making that, I don't know if you're ready to be a leader.
Your thing made me think of two things, and I'll keep this part short because this is a whole other Zoom, but that's part of why, like in the group, I keep posting self-care because nobody is taking care of you. You're the leader, you're taking care of everybody else. So you have to find that time at some point to then, make sure you're taking care of you because you can't keep
Mhm.
being selfless and pouring into everybody else if you let yourself completely fall apart. But that's a whole different conversation. The other thing I was thinking about when you were talking, though, it's something that for once I finally really had navigated decent amount of the basketball world and really kind of learned the insides and out of it. One of the things I always said to players and still do, and it's not just players, it's people that are working in the front office end as well. The business tests you to see how bad you want it. Because you've got those players who think, oh, I'm good enough. I should have this contract. I should be doing this. I should be getting paid this. I'm worth more money, yada, yada. It's not about that. It's a business. And so it's not just a matter of, are you good enough to do it? It's, are you dedicated enough? Are you actually going to put in that work to do it? Because the people who come in and just somebody doesn't see their value and they give up, like, no, you're not built for this business, because at the end of the day, it's a business. They're about making money. And so if you're not the piece that's bringing them the money that they think they're going to make, you're gone. You're making money off of other people. Agents will string you along forever if they've got another player who's guaranteed to make them more money. They'll keep you signed and keep talking, but they're going to sell those guys that are making them guaranteed money versus, spending a ton of time on you to maybe get 10% of $1,000 or 15% of 1,000. It's that it tests you, because the ones who succeed, the ones who make it, that, like I said, don't have that name or don't have that automatic in. Whether it's the right connections or you just transition from player to coach or, any of those things, or player to front office, like in basketball ops, like any of those things. If you are one of those people who actually has to work your way in, and this is probably a lot of businesses, but it's going to test you. How bad do you want it? Are you willing to put in this time? Are you willing to work your butt off to not be noticed and survive so that 10 years later you're in a better place and you're there and you're doing more because people saw that you went through all of that and you stuck it out and you did this? And so now you've got people who are like, that's the guy I'll do something for. Royale Ivy is my always example of that, because this is a guy who managed to play in the league for 10 years as a role player. You don't see that. Like, we're talking second or third string point guard, depending on what team he was on. Most people I mentioned him to have never even heard of him. But 10 years in the league, because he was the guy who was working harder than anybody else in practice. He was the guy who was the character guy. He was the guy who would do anything the team asked, whether it was an appearance somewhere or anything. He was the one who put in more work than most people. And he stayed. Now he's coaching. He's coached with the OKC Blue. He's coached with the Thunder. He's with the Nets now. He's coached in Africa. Like, this is, you put in that work, all of a sudden, people may not know who you are, but we're going to put you in these positions to succeed because we know what you're worth. We know what you're made of, and we know that you can survive the business.
Mm-hmm. And the last thing that I'll mention when it comes to sacrifice, and this was a great example, and I never thought of it until I read the book. He says a great example of the law of sacrifice is championship teams repeating their championship run, because they've made the sacrifices to become the champs. But a lot of times those teams aren't willing to make additional sacrifices to repeat, because it's like, you're at the top. What more sacrifices do we have to make?
You think it's easy to stay there when it's actually very difficult. It's easier to get to the top than it is to stay at the top.
Exactly, because you have to make additional sacrifices, and that margin for error is a lot slimmer than it was before, because now you got a target on your back as well. So add that added pressure to it. Like, we'll see how the Denver Nuggets, I know y'all tired of us talking about basketball. We'll see how the Denver Nuggets,
so it is.
We'll see how the Denver Nuggets respond to that, because they made considerable sacrifices. Jamal Murray missing a season and a half with his injury, and they stayed with him and came back. So I think that that's just a great example of, you can be the greatest of the greats. You can sacrifice and get your way to the top, whether that be the top of business, top of athletics. But are you willing to continuously make those sacrifices?
Yeah.
To stay at the top? And that's tough. That's honestly, that takes a lot of mental toughness to do.
Well, and if we take it to a business example, like, let's say you put out this product that ends up like being the hit of the market. all of a sudden everybody's replicating your product. So if the only thing you do is make this product or service or whatever, then everyone else is going to outpace you because they've now cut into your market. And so
Mhm.
you're not making the money that you used to make. And somebody else is going to capitalize on that and they're going to tweak it and make it better because they're not just trying to catch you, they're trying to pass you. So if
Mhm.
all you do is keep making the same product or keep providing the same service, you're here initially, but then everybody else is going to go above. You have
Mhm.
to start, okay, now we've got this product. How can we build on this product? How can we make it even better? Or how can we create something new that does just as well?
Yeah. And a great book for those listening out there or watching that talks about that is Jim Collins' Good to Great. He talks about how there were businesses. He has a bunch of case studies of businesses who were at the top, but they were near the top or at the top, but they somehow couldn't maintain that competitive advantage. But that goes into, a bunch of different strategies and different things. But it's a proven the reason why I brought that up is because it's literally proven through these case studies that once you get to the top of business, like you just said, there's people coming after you trying to beat you
Oh
and
yeah.
chase you. So you got to consistently make those sacrifices.
You have and be versatile and adapt and continue to just grow and not get comfortable. I mean, this was before we started recording the whole growth thing. Like, if you are in business, or if you are a leader, or if you are anybody who wants to be better than you are today, get comfortable being uncomfortable. Because
Hmm.
the only way to grow is to go through that uncomfortable phase. So if you're just basking in your success and you think everything's great and you're not feeling that discomfort, you've stopped. You've stopped going forward.
So I think we have enough time to get this last law, well, not the last law, but the law number 19, and then the next call we should be able to wrap it up. The law of timing. So he gives a couple examples, like a matrix, if you will, of like timing. The example he uses was Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. I'm sure we all are aware
Mhm.
of that incident, but the surrounding counties or city or towns of New Orleans had mandatory evacuations a couple days before the
Mhm.
storm. New Orleans, who's at a lower sea level, does nothing. Then last minute, he gives like an optional an optional evacuation, and then we all know how that ended. Millions die, stranded, so on and so forth. But um, he uses this matrix, or maybe these I don't want to say analogies, but I'll just read through them. He says the wrong answer at the wrong time is obviously bad. The right actions at the wrong time, you come into resistance.
Mhm.
Wrong action at the wrong time is a mistake. Right action at the right time equals success. Let me repeat that one more time because I got that out of order. The wrong action at the wrong time is a mistake. The right actions at the wrong time, you're going to encounter resistance. But the right action at the right time equals success. Um, and he also goes through a couple things that play into your decision making and timing it. He says your understanding of the situation, your maturity in having the right motives, your confidence, which ties into your decisiveness, your experience, your intuition, and your preparation. So all of those things play into that law of timing. And I'm smiling because it's like, so as AP alluded to, we're doing this clinic and we've been working out the kinks with like the automations and the back end flow. And I had mentioned something like, oh, like we can just confirm, confirmation a couple of days before. And she's like, no, that's too last minute. We can't do that. That's the law of timing right there. Like, could it be the right action or no? So sorry. Is that the right action to wait to a couple of days before to confirm? I don't think so. I don't think that's the right action. I don't think it's the right timing. So that's going to be a mistake waiting to happen. But if we correct it now, well ahead of time, before, we're going to have success in our endeavor. And I think a lot of that, I think a lot of times, and this is an opinion at this point. I think sometimes our timing is off because of the confidence, the experience, and the preparation. Mainly the preparation piece. Because I think in business a lot of times, what is it called? Emergency action plans or EAPs. Um, but being able to prepare for those last minute things that you didn't expect to come up. I think that's lack of preparation. For example, New Orleans. I think that's lack of preparation on the governor's part, like not realizing that hey, New Orleans is below sea level. Like we should probably prepare, well ahead of time, for something that we know. But I think again, that's my opinion. I think not having the confidence, the experience, and the preparation really lead to bad timing because you might have the right action but you might delay the timing because you're not confident, maybe you didn't even prepare to take that action. So now it's the wrong time to even make that action. I don't know. Maybe you can share
Or
your
you're
thoughts.
or you're so excited about something that you just dive right in without preparing. And so the idea and the concept is great, but your timing is bad because you haven't done the work with it. In some ways, this whole thing makes me think of us. Like, how long have we been connected? We've been connected for years, like in different
Hmm.
ways. And it's been the past year that because of the paths that we have taken over the last few years have led us here to where both of us have more experience and we have like just a million different factors. And now we're further apart distance wise because all of this would have been a whole lot easier when you were in Orlando. But neither one of us were in the place then to do what we're doing now. But now we initially connected on the entrepreneur group, which has now led to the clinics. And it's, there are bigger things at play in both of those visions, but it was
Hmm.
timing. We weren't ready. We didn't have the right experience before. And I mean, I can say for myself, I can't speak for you on this one, but I definitely don't think I would have pushed myself, like not push myself, but put myself out there as much, like the way that we've been putting ourselves out on multiple different social medias and like really selling this because we know that this is good. I don't know that I would have had the confidence before. I would have been like, well, I think this is the right thing to do, but
Hmm.
and it's a difference because when you're selling yourself from that perspective of knowing that you have the best product, it makes a difference versus when you're kind of on the fence.
Yeah, for sure. I think that confidence is the driving force behind all the other things, right? Driving force behind gaining the experience and willing to go through that sacrifice, right? Like the confidence that if I sacrifice now, I know I have a very strong feeling that I'm going to get this desired result at the end. Having the confidence that if I prepare now, I'm sure I'm giving myself a chance to succeed, right? I think that all starts with that confidence piece, and maybe even starting with why and why you're doing it
Yeah.
to begin with. I think
Always
the
start
more
with
in, yeah, I think the more in tune you really get, and sometimes that why I don't want to say changes, but maybe it shifts a little bit. But I think the more you stay in tune with your why, I think it makes it a lot easier to time it because you know who you are, you know the skills that you lack, and you know what you need to do in order to put yourself in a position to
yeah.
make those decisions and take those actions. You know?
Yeah, the driving force matters and just having people keep you like in that right direction and reminding you like this is the work we're doing now, but it won't always be this difficult. At
Yeah.
some point it gets to the point where you've got the process down and all now for the most part a lot of things are routine and now you're dealing with the isolated major
Mm-hmm.
things that take the time drain versus the constant time drain.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we got less than a minute left. So before they kick us off, appreciate y'all for tuning in with another week after a very long hiatus. That is
We will
okay.
try not to do that again, but no promise.
No promises, but I promise we're doing the best that we can. I can promise you that. AP, has been real. I'll catch you next week.
Yep, we got multiple things next week. So keep an eye on
Yeah,
your calendar. We got a lot going on next week on Zoom.
I'm ready for it all. I'm ready for it all. All right,
All
AP.
right.
Peace. Enjoy the beach.
Enjoy your holiday.
Yes, ma'am. Peace.
See ya.